hearing the evacuation alarm, leave the building by the nearest marked exit route. Follow the green signs to the assembly point, which is the large staff car park opposite the entrance to the building. Anyone who cannot use the stairs will be helped by officers present after others have left. Do not return to the building until told it is safe to do so by an authorised officer. And if I could ask everyone to switch their mobile phones to silent. This is a meeting of the Cabinet. For those watching on YouTube, I'm Councillor Jonathan Ashebris, Leader of the Council. To my right and in front of me are members of the Council's Cabinet, and to my left are the officers who will be supporting this meeting this afternoon. The first item on our agenda is to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. Colleagues, are there any declarations to make? I see none, thank you. Item 2, to receive any apologies for absence. I think all members are present. Item 3, to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting of the Cabinet that was held on the 18th of July. If I could ask members to indicate by voting whether they are happy to agree that set of minutes, please. That's unanimous, so those minutes are agreed. Item 4 is to consider any items the Leader agrees to take as urgent business. I do not have any. So we'll turn to item 5, which is the Budget Management Progress Report from April to July. And I'll turn to Stephen Fitzgerald, the Interim Head of Corporate Resources, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. What we're looking at today is the budget management report for the next period and the period leading up to July, which shows the in-year position of the council and what we're projecting as the final outturn at the end of the year. Members will recall when we last looked at this at the previous Cabinet meeting, we were in a relatively favourable position at the end of May, demonstrating an underspend of approximately 81,000. Since that has occurred, obviously there have been fundamental changes in the macroeconomic picture, and it is entirely proper and appropriate and technically correct to reflect those changes which have happened in recent months, particularly relating to inflation, with the consumer price index somewhere around about 10% at the time of writing the report, and also with the cost of energy prices. So with this cost of living pressure, this has fundamentally changed what we are projecting going forward. Having said that, it's not all gloomy news in this report. In terms of some of the council income, we've had marginal outperformances of what we were budgeting at the start of the year, and this is true of car parking, planning applications, land charges, licensing and outdoor facilities, all of which are detailed in the report. So actually we are seeing some of the, if you like, the impacts of a local economic recovery against a rather larger picture in terms of our underlying costs due to the effects of inflation. Also, we've got a little bit of a small pressure on staffing budgets, but nothing too severe. Another positive thing I will point to is Treasury management, which we refer to later in the report, which is over 900,000 currently, projected above target. And that is the service our Ada and Worthing colleagues provide the council. So that is relatively good news in this year, and it's probably worth mentioning to committee as well, at Audit Committee, we tightened our criteria for council counterparties in terms of the loans that we are making to other local authorities to make them more stringent in these difficult economic times. But that is actually showing a very good performance at the moment, which I think is worth reporting to members. However, the fundamental impact of the cost of living, energy prices on our key services, we think we have to up our projections. So overall, when all these sums are done and all these assumptions are made, we are reporting a potential overspend now of about 702,000 for this year. So it is a situation which most local authorities, I think possibly all, are finding themselves in. But I will say that Mid Sussex has the financial resilience to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that update, Mr. Fitzgerald, and I think will come as no surprise to any of the members here or indeed residents more broadly that the inflationary challenges across the whole economy would affect local councils as well, and I think only slightly offset positively by the improved treasury management position that I'm sure will help us in managing that pressure over the course of the year. And in saying that, really just I think important that we continue to be very focused on the work that we're doing as a council and very long list of projects progressing throughout the council that will benefit the public, and no matter the challenges that we have day to day, that's what we need to carry on focusing on delivering as well. And it's always really good to see a reminder in these reports of the projects that are in progress. I'll turn to my cabinet colleagues for any comments or questions. Councillor Salisbury.
Thank you, Leader. Just one question on the use of the Consumer Prices Index. It's a very specific basket of items, which to me doesn't necessarily represent much of the expenditure that we have. Because whereas the average household has a fuel bill, which is taken into account, the fuel bills feeding through to us through waste services and the other are much higher. So without labouring through a number of things, I just wondered as a general point, is there not a better way that we can look at what our inflation is as opposed to what the general national CPI inflation is? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I mean, we refer to CPI in the report, and it's, if you like, a general indicator. Actually, when we do our underlying calculations, it's not just purely applying CPI, but it's looking at things like our contracts, like our leisure contract, like our waste contract, and applying a local judgment of what we think. But CPI is quite regularly used and tends to be used a little bit more nowadays than retail price index as a more comprehensive view. But I can assure you that we don't purely just apply it across the board, that we take account of local factors and do it in a local way. I mean, I think in local government generally, it is generally used. So I don't think there is a national local authority index that I am personally aware of. So it does have quite a wide use, but we're not just using that.
Thank you. Councillor Demir.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Very clear as ever. And really good news about the car parking charges. I'd be interested to see the next quarter's figures on that. Tiny question, and I also thought it was very good news about the interest on page 15. I just, on page 16, para 42, our investment in the local authorities property fund, are we expecting that to get a little better in the foreseeable future? And my other question was the write-offs and credit notes for the orchards retail rents. I just wondered I can understand the write-offs, but not the credit notes. Could you explain?
On the, and I know, of course, the property fund is the churches, charity and local authorities property fund. This is a fund which is used by a large number of local authorities for deposits, and is on a, as it says, on a property basis and indexed accordingly. It has underperformed what we expected, as we say in the paragraph here. Do I expect it to improve? I think the thing about using this particular fund is it is investment rather than speculation. So sometimes if there is variances, we have to be a little bit patient with it. But the underlying performance of property as an asset is actually very good on a medium-term and long-term basis, but sometimes slightly less good on a short-term basis. So I think we have to be a little bit patient with this, but I think if it continues to underperform our expectations, there's probably scope for renewing this investment. And I think one of the things we can do with our treasury management, our advisors, Link Asset Services, and indeed other local authorities, is just have a look about how this is doing in the long term and how we feel about that. And you having raised it, Councillor, I think that's something we can take away. So far as the credit notes on the orchards, I'd like to come back to you in detail and writing on that one, if that would be all right. No, you're quite right to ask the questions.
Thank you. Councillor Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I want to say that I'm very pleased to see that the Burgess Hill Place and Connectivity Programme is proceeding the way it is, and that there are no forecast variations anticipated at year end. Likewise, I'm really pleased that the Rural Connectivity Programme is underway, and that's going to make a significant difference to rurally based businesses and make Mid-Sussex even more attractive to do business in. And in terms of housing adaptations for disabled people and vulnerable people and so on, I'm very pleased that we have committed a further £434,000. And then over the page to page 14, there's a whole list of quite large projects that are being undertaken in Mid-Sussex at a time when many similar councils, and certainly the business world, are seriously having to pull in their horns, as they say. And as you mentioned, we are resilient, but we'll need to talk about that resilience going forward with our budget discussions in the coming months, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webster. Councillor Balsey.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald, for the report. Completely understand. I think we all do the cost of living pressures, and it was, I'm sure residents appreciate hearing that the council is at the moment resilient from a financial perspective, so that's good news. But we're not at all complacent, and I know a lot of work is going in on all of these items to make sure we're delivering the best value for money that we can for our residents. Councillor Webster already highlighted some of the projects on page 14 in general terms, but I just think it's worth highlighting that amidst this different, challenging economic time, it's really good to see some of the landscape and leisure projects progressing. I've been involved over the last few days with some of the meetings with the Centre for Outdoor Sport and look forward to further information on that coming forwards. It's still at draft stage, but it's a tight timeline we'll be working to for delivery of this project, which will benefit nearly every family, I think, in Burgess Hill, directly or indirectly, plus families from outside as the new sports facilities come online, and they will, I know, have very significant use. But beyond Burgess Hill, the Pease Pottage Park work is starting this year, as is the Haywards Heath improvements in Victoria Park and the Mount Noddy improvements as well in East Grinstead. So it's really good that right across the district we are still putting spades actually in the ground, and I look forward to further reports on those future meetings. But I hope that residents will soon start to see the benefits of the work and the investment that we're making for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hillier.
Thank you, Lee. Just a few comments, and actually comments made by yourself and colleagues I agree with entirely, so I shan't repeat them. But I'm certainly glad I'm a councillor sitting here in mid-Sussex, and many other authorities I think are going to find some things really, really tough. We're going to find it tough, but at least we've got a good base. Councillor Demir actually asked the questions I was going to ask, but as you mentioned about the property fund, it was something I had concerns, so I just wanted to add my weight to your happy response that this is something we should look at, because very interesting times are potentially ahead, and I think we just need to be mindful of where that money is kept and is it in the appropriate place when times may get turbulent. And the other thing is just to congratulate officers. Parking used to be my thing, and back in those days, a year, 18 months ago, during the heights of COVID, I think officers did a tremendously good job of actually predicting what incomes may be, and to be only £4,000 out, or whatever it is, on parking deserves congratulations. It makes life easier for us as councillors, knowing that we can have confidence in your predictions and your figure work. So congratulations and thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillier. Got no more members indicating to speak, so we'll go to the recommendations in paragraph 5, little 1 to little 7, and if I could ask members to vote on those en bloc, please. And those are unanimously agreed. Thank you. We'll go now to item 6, Service and Financial Planning Guidelines for 2023 to 2024. And again, Mr. Fitzgerald is going to introduce this for us. Thank you.
Yes, this is the second of these two financial reports this afternoon. And if we follow the chronology, the report we've just dealt with is the in-year position, and this is setting the picture for the position going forward, the setting of next year's budget and the medium-term position. And in a way, it sets the framework for the coming year. One of the key things is, of course, decisions that central government will be making on resourcing, the nature of business rates and all these matters. Of course, we now have a new Secretary of State for Levelling Up in Communities, and as yet it is unclear about the direction he will take. At the time of writing this report, which of course was delayed due to the death of Her Majesty the Queen, we had Michael Gove as the Secretary of State, and he had made a commitment to a 2-year financial settlement for local authorities. I think the jury is still out as to whether that will be what the new government wishes to do, and the new Secretary of State, or whether they decide to adopt a different approach. So that is a little bit of uncertainty about the framework. What we've tried to do is kind of paint the picture by showing the national position historically, but also our local position, where we've been and where we potentially might be going to. I think a key question, which if I point members to paragraph 30, there's a chart which shows the budget gap as we are currently calculating it on the basis of what we know at this point in time, which of course may change as government policy and economic factors come into play. But in a sense, for the 23-24 financial year, it shows a relatively favourable picture with a relatively small budget gap, that accelerating as we go across the planning period, as the chart shows. So while we have to be rigorous in our search for savings and the delivery of those for next year, it is perhaps not as severe a position as some other local authorities will be facing. So that is our planning position going forward. Also, I'd point members to the recommendations, and obviously a key element is council tax, and all our assumptions in terms of medium-term financial strategy, and that graph I've pointed out are on the basis of Mid-Sussex District Council taking the maximum that the Secretary of State allows before a referendum for council tax increases. Obviously, that is one for members' discretion, but that is what we've shown in this report. I think I'll also point at the end of the report, we show the impact of council tax increases or not increases in terms of the financial effect of those. But at the moment, I would emphasise to members that we're assuming the maximum level of council tax increase in this report. I think one of the other things we've already mentioned about the positive position of the council's finances, particularly in respect to reserves, balances and money we have put aside. Every year, I believe Mid-Sussex has done a review of this, and we're proposing, making a recommendation here that we do a review of these and see if all these pots of money are still relevant, whether they need to be aggregated, whether they will be spent, the rate of spend and all the other factors. So this is what we're proposing, and to do that at management team level going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Mr. Fitzgerald. Colleagues, comments on this report? Councillor Demir.
Thank you for this. Yes, you suggest putting up our council tax to the government level, which I think I probably agree with, because that percentage is nowhere near the percentage of inflation at the moment in any form. So it's a very little for a lot that our residents will be getting back to us. And the other point I was going to make was that on page 27, you're talking about the leisure contract. And it is good to see that our leisure centres are really coming back to their full potential, I'm hoping. It's certainly, they're working at 75% of what they were pre-pandemic. So this is all good news. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demir. Councillor Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. The national picture is not particularly good. Neither is the international picture. So obviously we're going to have to keep this under close review as the year passes. But I certainly would agree with that £5 increase in council tax. And of course, our share of the council tax bill is actually quite small, really. But what we need to do is ensure that the services that we do deliver are running as efficiently as they possibly can do. And I fear that that work has already been done. So I would support that review of the reserves and where those reserves are used and perhaps not used going forward, because a £5 increase in the total picture is actually quite a small part of our income. And I'd like a little bit of detail, please, if I may, on how much impact that £5 increase actually has in our budgeting process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Webster. Mr Fitzgerald, can you help Councillor Webster with that one?
Yes, I think what may help members in this discussion is a little bit of a thing that people sometimes do is a council tax ready reckoner, which shows the effect of, if you like, the impact of each pound up to £5, and also we can give an indication of what that extra council tax buys in terms of services, and that's something I think we can take away and have a look at and give you a note on that, so that that may help clarify this. And I think that you make a very good point, which perhaps I didn't make in the introduction, is the mid-Sussex element proportionately is quite a small element of the overall council tax, which of course includes the county, the police authority and the borough authority. So it is quite a small proportion of the overall bill to residents.
Thank you, and I just note in paragraph 39, a note there that £1 of council tax is £64,000 of revenue, so not very significant in the overall scheme of the council's budget and financial commitments. Councillor Balsey.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you again for the report, and I agree with my colleagues regarding the £5 increase. I don't think anyone ever wants to put up council taxes, particularly in this year of all years. However, I think, as is evident elsewhere in the report, our cost pressures are such that I don't think we have any alternative, and it's actually responsible of us to do that, to ensure that we can continue to provide the level of services that we would like. I note the comments regarding the budget gap increasing as the years go out. I sort of feel I've been there before, as I think that's not an uncommon trend, and we've seen that in the past as well. I know that it gets ever harder to try to reconcile that gap as well, due to all the work that officers have been doing to create efficiencies and to structure the cost base. But I've no doubt we will use our best endeavours to narrow those budget gaps for the future. My concern for this year particularly is just the obvious point. I know Councillor Demir has already highlighted it, and that leisure performance is increasing well again. But I think it would be remiss if I didn't just question Mr Fitzgerald just his level of confidence in respect of the amount there, and what if changes are to be made to the budget, just what sort of times would we be working to for those as we move forward?
I think just on the Pacific Leisure contract issue, because I mean, there is undoubtedly uncertainty. I would want to emphasise to members that actually at management team level, we have considered this quite seriously and in detail, and think what we're reporting to you is the right thing to be doing at this point in time. Should the situation change, I mean, we will obviously be reporting regularly to Cabinet and, of course, informally to members about how the budget is shaping up going forward in similar fashion to we have done in previous years. And if we have to give more modest assumptions about the leisure contract, or indeed any other aspects, we will feed that in and adjust the plan accordingly, and of course share it with members and Cabinet as we go into this spring period when we actually set the budget in February. So there is still plenty of scope to make changes and make adjustments and make sure that we get our projections as good as we can do. And there's still plenty of opportunity for that during the autumn and the early spring period. If I could just mention something else, which I don't think we mentioned the Chancellor's recent announcement, and just say we're also aware of that and the opportunity for enterprise. And again, we're looking at the impact of what that might have in a positive way on Mid-Sussex and Mid-Sussex District Council as a local authority.
Thank you. Councillor Hillier.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, like others have commented, I just wanted to endorse their comments around this. And what we're setting in train here is quite significant in terms of the recommendations. So I felt only appropriate just to say I support them. But I think probably also point out, yes, in light of the current inflationary pressures, an increase to the maximum allowed may feel generous, but of course it's not going to be so for our more vulnerable residents, because they're the ones least likely to get income increases linked to inflation. But I think it's important that they and everybody recognise that a huge amount of the work that we and officers do is actually to support those vulnerable residents. So I would just ask officers when they're looking at service plans to make sure that all the work that's done to support those most vulnerable is as good as it possibly can be, because they are going to need it, and that's what we should be here for over the next few years. But I support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cromie.
Thank you. My colleague, Councillor Hillier, said most of what I was about to say, but I'd just say that the additional information around the council tax increases and the impact of that will be quite useful. I don't think this is going to be the last of the tough decisions we're going to have to make as a council, and I don't think any of us want to impose any further financial burdens on our residents, but we also have to balance up our position of being responsible and having responsible governance. And I think that looking at the figures in front of us, I think that's the situation that we're currently faced with. And I think in that dilemma, we have to be responsible.
Thank you. Councillor Webster, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Chairman. I too wanted to make that relationship between the £5 that to some people will not be regarded as an increase at all, really, because £5 is probably the cost of a cup of coffee by the end of the year. If it's not already, it's a while since I've bought a cup of coffee, so maybe it's gone up. But to some people who aren't managing, that's a lot of money, and we need to make sure that we've got the right services in place to support those people. That was all that I wanted to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, and agree with those comments, and of course, really important as well that the council tax support scheme will continue to support lower income and more vulnerable residents as well. I think colleagues have made some very good points in that discussion. I think it's very clear that we have a challenging financial outlook facing us, and no doubt that will continue to evolve over the autumn as the work on putting the budget together continues. As a council, we need to continue to focus on what we've always focused on, which is being prudent with public money, delivering the services that our residents expect from us, and continuing to drive forward the improvements in facilities and the projects that we want to see in our communities. And I think balancing all of that is going to be challenging, but as Councillor Balsi said, we've had to address some of those challenges before and have a good record of doing so. I agree with colleagues' comments around council tax. I think the responsible course of action is to do as the report recommends, and in fact that said would be a real terms cut in council tax this year, and so I think it's important to balance all of those things up, but continuing to provide those services for our communities is the most important thing. I'll ask members now to go to the recommendations in page 3, little 1 to little 3, and if I could ask members to vote on those, please. And those are agreed unanimously. Thank you very much. That concludes this afternoon's agenda. If I could ask members to just remain in place while the live feed concludes, and thank you very much for your attendance.